我们今天很荣幸的邀请到 McFriend 他是在MySQL 里面非常重要的人物。那他现在是 Oracle MySQL 的 Product Director， 就是我们的产品总监，所以我们产品的相关的事情都是由他来处理的。那实际上他是一个资安专家。那他在早期的时候就有创立公司，然后自己做了一个非常有名的一个 TD， 就 Transparent Data Encryption 的一个软体叫公柔。那后来他在3年以前加入我们这个团队，那成为我们的产品总监。那很荣幸邀请他呢，那跟各位分享 MySQL 8.0 上面，尤其是如果说你用 MySQL 8.0用在比较 Mission Critical Application 上面，怎么去帮你的系统加强它的安全控管。Okay. Mike, please start. Over to you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulty and delay. And thank you for COSCUP to invite me to speak today about MySQL 8.0 security assessment and hardening. What, how, and when. As Ivan said, I'm Product Management Director at Oracle for MySQL, and I focus on security. Today, I don't think I'll be talking about any features, but if I do, it's not a commitment. And so we get into security best practices, and really it's about assessing what you've got, preventing things from happening. If things do happen, detect what went wrong, and then if all else fails, being able to recover. So I'm going to talk about those 4 areas. So on the assessment side, right, you're trying to find out, make sure that you don't have any open risks or vulnerabilities. You need to make sure that you have the right controls in place. And so one thing that people make a big mistake on is they don't secure a server from the start. Are going to hit your server immediately, right? If somebody is going to find a weakness, it's at the beginning. And so you should do that right from the start before you put anything into production. And you need to make sure before you put anything in production that your policies are in place for security or for regulatory requirements for something like PCI or GDPR, or there's a number of so many regulations out there now. You need to make sure you understand what the assets are, what the data model is, and what you need to protect. You need to identify vulnerabilities, right? Are you on an older version of the server, right? Does it have a vulnerability? Do you need to upgrade? And you need to make sure that you have a strategy for managing risks. So if something does go wrong, right, that you can recover, right? Somebody encrypts all your disks, you can just, shoot the machine and create a new one, restore everything, and be back and up and going quickly, right? And then finally, you need to make sure that, you're just using trusted software, right? So it's not just MySQL, but it's application software. It's the operating system. It's everything that's there is what makes up your security front, right, that you're using to protect. So one thing you need to do is you need to first review what you can do, right? And so we've written a guide to MySQL secure deployment. It's not a lengthy guide, but it's a fairly comprehensive guide about things that you need to go through and think about. We have an enterprise monitor, and there are many other third-party products on the market that'll do assessment of MySQL as far as, is it set up in a secure way? Qualsys, there's various other vendors out there. And then I am personally working on some security benchmarks. And so I'm working with the Center for Internet Security. I've written everything up, and they're basically working on the final things to release the MySQL 8.0 benchmark, likely this fall. I'm also working with the Department of Information Security in the U.S. on their secure technical implementation guideline. And these things are made public, and that one's especially comprehensive about all the things you can do to set up MySQL securely and why you need to do certain things. And if you need this type of thing, how you set it up in MySQL. So first you need to harden the environment, right? That's the most important thing. And so you really need to make sure that you, first of all, have the accounts in MySQL under control, right? You don't, the fewer login accounts, the better, but at the same time, each login account needs to be associated with an individual. So, so make sure you minimize the number of accounts, that they're specific for a certain task, and you do that from the get-go. Also, you need to make sure that the operating system is especially minimized. It doesn't have very many accounts on it, right? Really anymore, the only thing you want running on operating system is MySQL account and maybe the root account, right? Very, very few accounts. From there, you want to make sure that, the operating system's up to date, right? If the operating system's vulnerable, then that can lead to vulnerabilities in MySQL. So make sure you patch not just your operating system, but that you also patch MySQL. We come out with what we call CPUs, so critical patch updates, every quarter. Security patches are always the highest priority possible. And you can watch our newsletter, you can watch our release notes and see everything that's going on to make sure that what's going on with MySQL. Another mistake on the yes.
Sorry, Mike, for interrupting you. Did you progress your slide? Our slide still remain in the first page.
Oh, I did. Yes.
In the first page.
You're using dual monitor, right? Dual monitor.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm progressing the slides, Ivan.
You can turn this dual monitors to be same screen. Yep.
Oh yeah. That's good. Yeah. Sorry.
Is it on operating system security now?
Yes.
Highlighted in blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there must be a delay. Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep going. So on the operating system side, we set up our packages to configure SE Linux. We set up our packages to configure AppArmor or whatever. And so often people will change things and it might break SE Linux or AppArmor. And don't just disable those two products, because they're very good at helping secure MySQL, securing the file system access levels. And the same applies to the firewall. So we've got documentation on how to set up SE Linux. We've got references I helped write on the port references on cables. And so, if you need to open up more ports, do that, but don't just shut down the firewall. Don't just shut down SE Linux. That's a common issue that we see people doing. All right, I'm changing the slide to the MySQL configuration. So another sort of new thing we changed in MySQL 8.0 is that we added this thing called set persist. And the reason we did that is that for security best practices, DBAs were no longer being allowed to have operating system access, right? They couldn't SSH in. And so now with set persist, the DBAs can change system configuration. It's changed in a file called mysqld-auto.conf, and that by default is in the data directory. The permissions on that, and to be able to see the configuration in that file are much tighter. And so it's actually less accessible than the my.conf file. And so I would recommend that you use this set persist and that you control settings through that. And again, we've got lots of ways you can look at the currently active settings with the performance schema variables tables. But this is a good thing and something that you really should do. And it's a way to keep the operating system clean. People aren't logging in and editing the files on the operating system. Instead, they're doing it through set persist. And set persist also will show you what changes have been made over time. And so you sort of have an audit record of that. All right, I'm going to change to layers of security, but I'm going to skip that one and go on to network security. So on the network security side.
Sorry,
yes,
Mike.
Yes, Ivan.
We still cannot see your progress. Now our page stay with operating system security. I think you've been moved ahead a bit, right?
Yeah. Okay. Are you on network security restrict client connections?
Yeah. No, we are at the operating system security. Page 10 should be page 10.
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure what to do about that, Ivan. It's not progressing. If you do, you want to share the slides?
Maybe let me share the slide, your slide, and flip the slide for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think
I think that would be better.
Yeah. Now on network security, are you using dual monitors? Just monitors
so are you at the page 14 or page?
I'm on page 13 of 49.
Page 13. Okay. Network security. Yeah.
We are able to see the screen now.
Okay. All right. So the point on page 13 is that that you have this ability to filter users based on the clients that they're coming from, and especially in the case of applications where you really know what sort of IP or host name space those are coming from. You really should set those. And in the case of root, you should definitely set those. All right, so I'm going to go to page 14 now. Okay. So page 14. Yeah. So page 14 is about setting the bind address, and so so sometimes you have servers that have more than one network interface, and often you only want MySQL to bind to certain ones of those, possibly internal ones, and so so we recommend that you set the bind address system variable to listen on the connection of specific network interfaces. The other thing that we recommend is that you set require secure transport equals on. In this way, you force everything to use secure TLS SSL, right? Or it'll use the socket file or shared memory if it's a local connection on the operating system. But in general, this is a very easy thing to do and something that really secures things a great deal more. If you do want to further limit admin addresses, we have a new feature called admin address and admin port, where you can specifically allow admin users to get on, especially in a case where the server may be locked up a bit. This address and port have higher priority, so they can always get on, and maybe you need to kill some connections or things like that if there's issues. And so I would recommend using the admin address and admin port as well. Plus, you can block that from the outside. All right, I'm going to go to slide 15. You really want, with any user on a system, right, you want to only allow them to have the resources that they need. And one of the things you can do in MySQL is that you can limit how many queries per hour or updates or connections or user connections per hour. And so you should really look at these things and set them, right? And so if you know how your applications are working, or if you know that this particular user, right, they're not going to be disconnecting and connecting a lot. So by setting these things lower, you decrease the odds of some sort of attack where they might load up too many connections or be able to extract data from your database too quickly. So this is another thing that you might want to do. All right, I'm going to go to slide 16. So slide 16 is about brute force attacks. And so these are cases where people are trying to, say, guess a password. And so with this connection controls, you can go in and you can define, you can say, hey, as people fail to log in with a certain password, I'm going to add a delay. And by the way, after they've tried a certain number of times, I'm going to just lock them out, or the delay is going to become so large that they can't get into my server. So a very simple thing to set. You can set it globally, and this really will prevent brute force, sort of password attacks on your server. All right, I'm going to go to slide 17. So this is kind of the no-brainer, but we automatically set up certificates on the server when you install, but really you should set up certificates that are from your own certificate authorities, right? So just don't forget to do that. And this is a reminder that you can then, you can validate these things with the X509 on each PIM file, make sure the subjects fit, things like that. And again, these are types of things that we go into more detail on the secure guide, on the CIS guide, and on the DISA guide when those come out. I'm going to go to slide 18.
What if you click on the preview screen?
What's that?
The preview, because you are using we are seeing you the preview screen. So you click on the preview screen, and then we may actually see you switch the slide. Yes. Now 18. Yes, 18, right?
Funny. Okay.
Yeah, we are watching the preview screen.
Okay. So now you see the actual slide 18.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So a lot of issues with data is data that gets user entered or gets entered from applications that aren't doing proper checks. And MySQL now in 8.0 we added the ability to add constraints, and so you can do these check constraints to further double check to make sure that you're not getting invalid data in. But again, you've got to make sure that the developers are properly coached, that they really must validate every data before you go in and create SQL statements, or that you bind variables and do more defensive programming techniques. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and let me see if that goes to firewall. Then that would work.
Yeah, firewall.
Yeah. Okay, so firewall, there's a couple of things. Firewall allows you to take an application that has known patterns, and you can put it into this learning mode, and it'll quickly learn all the SQL that this application is doing. And we have banks, for example, that have very large lists of SQL, like 200, 300,000 SQL statements that can very quickly be analyzed in a whitelist and allowed or not, or denied. And so typically you put this firewall in whitelist mode, and then you can put it sort of in alert mode. You can see if you've got the whole whitelist figured out. And then from there, you can put it in block mode. And there is really nothing much more secure than whitelist security on SQL for an application. All right, I'm going to the next slide and switching back and forth. The other thing we have is that auditing and firewall, they kind of go together. I kind of wish I'd combined the product names when we did this, But we can actually create even more fine-grained sort of access controls on things coming in through the firewall, through auditing with this, what we call abort statement. Oh, hold on. And so, so these rules can be very fine-grained. You can test them. So sometimes you have a SQL that's not whitelist friendly. And so this is another way to firewall SQL coming in and really harden. And we added this in 5.7. Of course, it's supported in 8.0 as well. So let me go to here. So on database user authentication is this topic now, and we're on page 22. And the thing to know about this is that in the past, many vendors, ourselves included, used SHA-1, right? That was the state of art for hashing passwords. Well, it's no longer the state of art, and it can be reverse engineered quite quickly. And so we had added something called SHA-256 password in 5.7, but turns out it was a bit slow, and a lot of applications that use MySQL connect and disconnect very, very rapidly, especially PHP. And so we designed what's called the caching SHA-2 password, and it's the best choice. It's very fast. It uses the SHA-256, and it's extreme. It does 5,000 iterations on that SHA-2. So it's an expensive algorithm, but once it's been done, then the first connection's expensive. The rest of them become quite quick. So, move your users over to this caching SHA-2. We have many blogs about that. And then make sure you set strong password policies. And I would say especially make sure that the passwords need to be long. Really, the change periods have increased from best practices point, but the length is really the key thing. So if you can go to 12 and longer, that's better. Also, I'll talk about dual passwords, but when you do need to rotate, it's often difficult. This really makes it easier so that you can do that. And then sometimes you need to generate random passwords for users, or you need to lock out accounts. And we added all those things in 5.7 and 8.0. Okay. Switch back and forth. So now I'm on page 24. And so the other trend we're seeing in industry is that in order to strengthen the ability to manage user accounts, you can do it through MySQL, but many vendors, many companies, many countries are going to the case where they need to know the actual user in MySQL. And what's become the sort of the de facto standard for that is using our LDAP plugin. It can work with Windows Active Directory, Open LDAP, you name it. And it supports things like Sassel and Kerberos. And this way, when somebody's doing something in MySQL, and they could be a powerful DBA, and this is maybe especially the case where you need to use this, then you can actually see, okay, who did this grant, or who created this user, or who did anything. And so it makes auditing, it makes logging more effective because you know exactly who's done what. And it's really not a good idea to have a bunch of users all using root and the same password. So I would suggest that. All right, so on user security, there's many layers of security we go at. So we have security at the user level, which is really global access, but then there's a database, or we also call schemas, right? And MySQL is really a single database with multiple schemas. It's really not a multi-database database, and we have one data dictionary. Or you can go to tables, or you can go to columns, or you can go to procedures and functions. And so you want to grant as much at the lower level as you can, right? You don't want to give, you prefer not to give user privileges at the global access level. So, you know, at minimum, try to not do grants except at maybe the database level or the table level when it comes to applications or to non-administrative users or administrative users that only have access to one schema. So that's really the point I'm making there. All right, and then along that line, in MySQL 8.0.16, we added a way that you can actually provide sort of global grants, but then remove access to specific schemas. So this is more of an ease of use thing. So, so you can turn on partial revoke, and say you don't want a DBA or you don't want certain people in say an accounting database or a finance database. Now you can just revoke them from that. And so keeping DBAs, allowing DBAs to do what they need to do, but also keeping them out of application data is important. And this revoke on the sensitive schema is a nice way to do that. So super is something as a privilege that we've had in the past that we're deprecating because it gave everybody privileges to everything. So so you need to look at the fact that we have finer grained system privileges now in MySQL 8. This is not in 5.7, and this is another reason you really want to upgrade to 8. And you can really not over-assign privileges to users, and don't use super too much going forward. Is our recommendation. Roles we added in 8.0. You can have a user can be assigned many roles. They can be assigned a default role. So when they log in, that default role or roles are applied. One nice thing you can do with roles too is you can assign non-default roles that are used to escalate privileges. So say you have an application and it needs to do some update in some sensitive table, then you might do set role, you know, more power. It escalates the privilege, allows you to do maybe an update or an insert in this table, and then you could revert it back to default. The reason that's nice is that if somebody hacks in and you really don't want them, you know, if they don't know about this, all the roles and things like that, then they won't know to set the role and escalate the privilege. So you can really make sure that you don't over-privilege an application as it does certain more privileged tasks in the data. All right, so at rest. So so often I talk to end users and they say, well, I don't need MySQL transparent data encryption. I've got my disks are encrypted. And my response to that is, that's great. That will protect you from theft, but it doesn't protect you from somebody getting onto the operating system and stealing files and getting information, which is the more typical thing that happens. And so really, that's where transparent data encryption comes into place. And so in this way, you turn on transparent data encryption, you can encrypt everything in 8.0 now. So data files, log files, redo, undo, binlog, relay, audit files, you name it, temp files, double write buffer. And so nothing on disk in the operating system will ever expose sensitive data. And so in this case, if somebody steals a disk, it's all encrypted, but also if somebody gets on the operating system, it's all encrypted. And really, you will never have any performance issues as a result of doing this. So let's see. So, and along with transparent data encryption, is key management, and we support a large number of things. You'll see Oracle Key Management Server and Oracle Cloud coming out in the next release as well. All right. So de-identification. So this is the case where you need to sort of hide credit card numbers, national IDs, phone numbers, things like that. So we have a suite of functions, and we'll have many more functions coming out this fall that allow you to sort of have ease of use in making sure that you can create views or selects or whatever that sort of hide information and get in compliance with all the different regulatory standards. All right, so say you've got everything hardened, everything set up, but there's no perfect world. Then you really need to make sure that you have some sort of system integrated with the operating system, with the database, so that you can either detect breaches or do post-mortem in case something bad happens. And so for that, we've got MySQL Enterprise Audit, so it can audit very specific things and encrypt it. We also have other things like general log, error log, NDB logs. We have performance schema. So there's lots of things that you can do to monitor what's going on inside of MySQL and see what's going on and push that into something like Oracle Audit Vault or Splunk or all these different SEIMs that are out there. And basically, and again, I've got a longer list here: Splunk, SolarWinds, Sumo Logic. Lots of companies do this sort of thing. We don't want to tell you which one you should use, but we do want to tell you that you do need to sort of pull that data off the system, and you need to send it into these SEIMs fairly frequently. And that way, if somebody's trying to do something, you'll capture the events that happened, with this sort of system. So we've got lots of things that can support that, and you really should make sure that you look into pulling logs off the server, pushing them into your SIEM system. MySQL Enterprise Monitor does a bunch of checks. So if you're not doing something right, it's a nice thing to check to see if you've done something wrong. And then finally, recovery, right? So maybe you did your best, but some insider with powerful privileges came in. So you need a resilient architecture, right? And so it may be that you use MySQL NetDB cluster and set up HA, right? It may be that you set up a MySQL NetDB replica set, right, in another data center with async replication. HA and security all sort of go together, right? So you need to not just, you need to think about failover, you need to think about recovery. And yes, it's nice to have backups, right? And by the way, your backups need to be encrypted. A lot of data gets stolen by stealing backups. But if you need to recover quickly, it may be that an HA solution is what you really need. Now, if everything gets blown away, in the end, you need an archival backup like enterprise backup. And at the end of the day, also, you are required to keep archival backups in many cases for many years, 7 years, 10 years in many cases for regulatory requirements. And so, backing up a database that's got transparent data encryption is tricky, and this is something you need to do. So to sort of wrap things up, right, security is an ongoing thing. It's a repetitive thing. You need to assess things from the beginning, and if you do that, you're really going to be in much better shape. But there's many preventative measures, there's many detection measures, and there's recovery measures you can put in place to protect yourself And in this world today, right, we see the news lines constantly, and you know, a little bit of prevention is very valuable, and I think there's so much you can do inside of MySQL. And again, I provided links at the beginning that'll line out a lot of things that you can just step through and do checks and make sure that you really got a secure database. And then in the end, you know, it all sort of looks like this, right? So, you know, just to sort of, I'm not going to walk through this diagram, but there's so much you can do there on the network encryption side, on the authentication side, auditing, backup, all these sorts of things. We have features for all of those, and we have a lot of documentation on how to secure those things. And we're happy to work with anybody that has questions about that. So with that, thank you for allowing me to present. I'm sorry there was a slight delay getting me hooked into the audio. So Ivan, I don't know if we have any questions or what we're going to do next, but that's my final slide. Thank you very much.
OK， 有问题吗？有任何问题吗？如果没有他，那我们就感谢 Mike 的分享，谢谢各位。